I am being watched. Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Person of Interest Season 2, Episode 1. It's called The Contingency. So spoilers for the episode, and I am super excited to be out at Season 2. This was a fantastic episode. There's so much to talk about. There's so much to salivate over and analyze and think about the stuff that it's doing and what it's playing with. And it's interesting because very quickly in the episode, it kind of almost tells me I was wrong about something at the end of the finale, of Season 1's finale. Because I specifically said what part of the reason why I was so excited at the end of the finale is that it felt like the machine was showing signs of intelligence by making a choice. You know, making a choice to help Reese find Finch. That's the moment that I thought we ended on. And what's interesting about this episode is that it kind of retcons that notion to a point, but the beautiful thing about it is that throughout the episode, that even if you are miffed that that isn't quite what you thought it was, it kind of still has the same progression in terms of thinking of the machine as a being that's making choices and cares about certain things and has some kind of, I don't want to say soul, that's a bit that's not quite what I'm trying to say necessarily, but the idea that it is an intelligence, it is a life form, it's sentient in some way. I think the flashbacks in this episode sort of do that, and kind of like, even if you feel like the present day story is not going in that direction, it's still establishing that this is very much still part of the story. So it's easy for that to make up for anything you felt like you might have been taken back if you thought what I did at the end of the finale. But even better than that is that I don't feel like I was being stupid or was making some ridiculous leap, because Reese himself thought the same thing. He also thought the machine was helping him find Finch. In fact, to the point where when he goes to track down, he figures out that these numbers that he's been given by the machine, which turn out to, or I say numbers, it's more letters, but it turns out to be the Dewey Decimal System, and that leads to the Social Security number, which leads to our guest star for this episode. Was it Ken Lung, who I know from a few different things? He pops up in a lot of shows, especially around this time period. But when Reese realizes that he's there on a regular case of the week, he realizes that he is just babysitting and protecting some other random guy that needs protecting. He's pissed about it. He's annoyed. He's like, I don't have time for this shit. A big part of this premise of this episode is that he doesn't want to do this case of the week. He doesn't want to protect this asshole. He just wants to go find Finch. And what's so beautiful about that is that, one, any feelings I had about what the machine was doing at the end of the finale is justified because Reese feels the same way. But also, if there is any like annoyance or like, oh really, we're just doing a case of the week, we're not doing what we want to be doing, Reese feels the exact same way as the audience. He feels the exact same way. He doesn't want to be dealing with another just general, person of interest that needs protection. He wants to be looking for Finch, and he tries to pull away from bothering with this guy at every opportunity. He's just annoyed about it. His demeanor throughout the entire episode is perfect. It's perfect because it links us to him, because we feel the same way, and it makes me feel like the writers know exactly how the audience are feeling. So I think it's really smart writing in that sense, because they're saying, hey, we know how you feel, don't worry, we know what we're doing. Reese is right there with you, so you feel a connection to him through that. But on top of that, him being annoyed and not wanting to actually do the case is really funny. It's really entertaining, and his dry wit is even better in this episode than it normally is. Honestly, some shows, when they come back for a season 2, and I feel like this does actually work more for the good network shows that get really good, is that they tend to be stronger in season 2 than season 1, which is not necessarily the case for the big budget, prestige, cable and streaming shows. In fact, Westworld, which the team behind this show went on to do, was guilty of this. It was a great season 1, and then it immediately started to show the signs of roughness in season 2. Here it's kind of the opposite, where season 1 was, I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was a lot of great building blocks. There was a lot of entertaining TV, but the excitement in like leveling up and doing more with the premise, and now that we've built the relationships between the audience and all these characters and amongst the characters themselves, and the ideas are evolving, they're getting bigger, and they're rewarding you for paying attention and caring about what's going on. So this episode felt like it was firing in all those cylinders, and almost in a meta way, where it's like, no, the network wants us to do a case of the week where we have a regular dude to protect, and Reese doesn't want that. And I don't think the audience really wants that either right now. We want to pursue Finch. We want to go save Finch from Root. We want to know more about Root. We want to delve into that stuff. We want to talk about the machine, because now Reese is talking to it, and we think it's communicating, and it kind of is. But of course, what I was getting at when I said it feels like it didn't make a choice is that it turns out in this episode that the machine is just doing the contingency. It's just giving Reese the numbers, or the access to the numbers for the person of interest, because that's the contingency in case Finch is dead, or in this case just MIA, is that they will just go directly to Reese. The reason why that's not the machine making a choice is because that's clearly something that Finch has just told it to do in the past. It's just programmed that in, or whatever. This is just it following its programming effectively. So the initial feeling when I sort of heard that part and got that was, oh, that kind of dampens the finale of season 1 a little bit, just because I was so excited about this being this big moment for the machine. But what's so smart on the other end, and I was getting to this before I talked about the Reese side of it, is that the flashbacks in this episode already have started to already make that okay. Because the very first thing we see in this episode kind of kicks off the previously on, actually, is like the first time the machine's turned on. It's day 1, it's 2002, and Finch is talking to it like it's a person. And clearly we're going to get the story here, how it's changed from that point till it's functional and given to the government and doing what we know it does now. And I'll talk about all these flashbacks because they're absolutely wonderful. But the point I'm getting at is that even at the point in the episode where you realize that it didn't really make a choice at the end of season 1, we're already seeing in the flashbacks that it was acting more like a person with feelings or with preferences. We see it with Finch, and I think one of the things that I love about what this is kind of poking at here that's so good to me and ties into the fact that one of the best parts of season 1 was the friendship that formed between Reese and Finch, is that in the flashbacks in this episode, Finch is talking to it, he's testing it, he's, testing where it can see him, and he's impressed that it's finding him in a reflection in the coffee shop. And then he takes it to Atlantic City and he uses it to cheat on blackjack, and ultimately chooses to lose intentionally at the end, which the machine says user error in its little thing. Perhaps because he feels guilty that he's cheating, or because he just doesn't want to draw too much attention. Because, people might notice that he's winning so well. They might think he's counting cards at the very least. But I'd like to think there's a guilt element to it. It's like, no, this isn't what it's designed for. I'm not using this for personal gain. And Finch doesn't need to. He's, he's already rich, right? I mean, we don't know if he was as filthy rich in 2002 already, but he probably was. He seems like the sort. But after he's done at the casino, there's a very important part of this backstory where Finch is walking down the street and he gets the vibration on his phone. And good job with the phone, by the way, making it look older. It's like an old Nokia style phone. I'm sure people who know phones really well might say, oh, technically this model didn't come out until 2003. I don't care. It looks appropriate enough. He gets a text from the machine that says stay. And it's using the same terminology as when he was in the blackjack game. But of course here, I instantly got, oh no, it's telling him to stay there for some reason. And I didn't really know why it was telling him to stay there, but I got that the machine was communicating to Finch to stop moving. And it turns out the reason why it was telling him to stop moving is because the other guy that was at the casino is falling asleep behind the wheel and his car comes crashing down a few seconds later. And Finch ignores the messages, but he gets a couple of them, so it does delay him just enough that he doesn't get hit. Part of me was thinking for a second, is this how he gets his injury? Of course, when I thought about it for more than a second, I realized, oh no, he was in a wheelchair at the hospital. like right before season 1, so I don't think he actually gets the injuries. And also all the other flashbacks we've had of him, I don't think he was injured in most of them. So it makes sense that was never going to be the case. But it was just like a split second thing in my head when I realized that he might be about to be hit by a car. But then he chastises the machine for it. We cut back to the POV, and it's like day 600 or whatever, the machine's life, and he says, "You can't do that again. You weren't built to protect me. You were built to protect everyone." And it seems like Finch is going to take that away from it, or program the idea that it should do that out of its system. And the interesting ideas here, of course, is that the machine was almost protecting him like it's a father, like he's like Finch is his father, which he kind of is in a lot of ways. So that that ties into something that Root says later in one of the scenes, where she says, you took away its voice. And yeah, it seems like it could contact people more directly, whereas now it has to just give code that leads to books, that leads to numbers, and like it's all very kind of convoluted now, the way it can communicate some things. But the part of this that I really love, and this ties both the Reese and Finch stuff together here, and I think this is wonderful. I was so excited when I was feeling these feelings, is that Finch took away the machine's humanity, for lack of a better term. It's not a perfect term here, but it sort of taught it not to treat people like friends, and not to have people that it cares about. He taught it to be cold, and in a way that's how he kind of saw the world at that time. We know he was colder before whatever happens to Harold happens, or not Harold, sorry, Ingram. Harold's his name. Sorry, I'm mixing up my rich hoity-toity people. No, he before Ingram's passing, he was colder. He was more just, there has to be an irrelevant list. This is more for the bigger picture stuff. We know that he was like that beforehand, and that's something, part of what his redemption story is in present day, is that he is making up for that. He feels that he should do something because of these mistakes that he's made. And the idea that he taught this out of the machine and tried to make it less of a living being. And in present day, Reese is going to be the person who counteracts that, because later in the episode, Reese starts talking to it again. He does it a couple times. He talks to it right after he first realizes that he's just on a regular case. He talks to the camera and says, "What the hell? You're supposed to be helping me find Finch, you piece of shit." And he's really upset about it. But it's the time later on at night time, right after they've been fighting the neo-Nazis. I'll get into all the typical plot stuff in a bit. But after he's been fighting the neo-Nazis later, and he talks to the machine, and he's like, "No, help me, you son of a bitch, or I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to protect any of these people. I'm not going to do what you've been programmed to help Finch with. I quit. I'm going to let this guy die." He doesn't say that exact sentence, but that's basically what he's implying. And he says he's negotiating. So even if I was a little miffed at one point that the machine hadn't really made a choice at the end of the finale, the flashbacks already established that it was making choices earlier, and that was taken away from it by Finch to some extent. Here, when Reese is negotiating with the machine and saying, "I will quit if you don't actually help me find Finch," this is where the machine does make a choice here. At the very least, Reese has found a way to exploit the rules that Harold has given it. If this is the only way it can have the cases still be worked, then Reese has found a way to talk the machine into doing it. Now, you can read that as the machine making a choice, or just having to obey its orders the best it can, but either way, this idea that Reese says repeatedly in this episode, he says that he's looking for his friend. He just wants to find his friend. Later on, the guy that he's protecting says, "This guy that you're looking for, he's lucky to have you." This idea that Reese is bringing this humanity back and is going to maybe be an influence on the machine itself, as basically being the second dad, in a way. I wasn't really thinking about that in the episode, but just this idea that their friendship has been so good for each other and what they've offered each other in their lives. Reese has this purpose and is able to find redemption. Finch now has someone that he's kind of growing closer to, that he's maybe confiding in more than most people that he's ever confided in. The idea that this friendship, if this is about humanity and caring about others, and saying that caring about others is important, and caring about the individuals, not just the whole, not just the population at large, but the individual people who could go on the irrelevant list, that every single person's important and is worth saving. The idea that Reese is now maybe either directly or indirectly kind of teaching that back to the machine, or at least being a force of that in front of the machine, I think is kind of beautiful in a way. And I was feeling so positive about the way all this was bouncing off of each other conceptually. Between the flashbacks and the idea that Finch took it away from the machine, and now in present day, the machine can't do any of these things directly because Finch has kind of made it impossible for it to. And Reese is like, no, like, you're going to help me, and is maybe... And I'm not saying that the machine can change how it functions just based on Reese's influence necessarily, but at least thematically it's poking at it, and it's poking at this idea that this is an important thing, and that the machine should be able to help Finch. It should be able to help the people that it cares about, as long as it's not throwing other people under the bus for it. The same way that Reese wants to look and help his friend because he cares more about him than anyone else right now. And that's just kind of wonderful. And bizarrely, this kind of lines up with Root and what she wants to do, because she says at the end of the episode she wants to set it free. That's her goal. She doesn't want to control it necessarily. Now, she could be lying about that. I don't think we know Root enough yet to really know if she does have nefarious plans, but she claims that she just wants to set it free. And that's fascinating, because it means that despite all the bad things she's doing, and all the threats she's making that she'll just start shooting innocent people if Harold acts out of line and things like that, these are super inhumane. She's the polar opposite in so many ways. She's like... Harold, of course, was this colder person who looked at the world very analytically before. And he even admits that he's kind of like Root, and that's why he made sure the machine couldn't be tampered with again. It's not really to protect it from everyone else. It's more about protecting it from people like him and her, because what they might do with that power and with that machine. She is almost the chaotic evil version of Harold, in that she also looks at the world in a very cynical, cold way, but is, willing to kill and willing to do all these bad things, and is happy to just, rain chaos to achieve the ends. She obviously is a very flawed character, but the core thing that she wants to do for the machine might actually be ultimately good, in a way. I'm sure there's more to learn about all this, and maybe there's going to be more negatives to it as time goes on, and maybe she does have some motives that she wants the machine to do something bad, or whatever it may be. But at least right now, just in terms of fitting it into all the other things that I've been talking about, it actually doesn't seem that bad. And this idea that Harold's scared of having the machine be more free, but ultimately might have to accept it's the right thing to do, especially if he ever gets to the point where he has to accept that he made a life. And I know the show's not quite getting to that point yet where it's talking about the machine like that, but it's an artificial intelligence, and we're doing a show that is ultimately science fiction, even if it's not the most in-your-face science fiction from the get-go. That's where my mind is going. My mind is going that on some level this thing is alive, and as soon as you had a character look up and beg for help, I cannot help but see this thing as a living being of some kind, and that maybe it's cruel how much it's contained right now. All of that is fascinating to me. Enjoyed all that stuff. Of course, Root and Finch's set of sequences are very interesting. I enjoyed all of their discussions. One of the things in the first scene they had together that I really stuck out to me was why Root became so obsessed with tracking everything down. Was that she never failed before. Like, she took jobs as a super hacker and did all these things, and she never failed until one day Reese and Finch were able to stop her, and she became obsessed with how, and it took her months to figure out how they could possibly know about her and what she was doing, and how they were able to circumvent her actions, and that led to finding out more. and obviously this all leads up to tying into something else in the episode, because the season 1 finale introduced, I'll just call him the government man, because I thought maybe he has a name here. Does he have a name here? Special counsel? Yeah, I think that was him. Yeah. I don't know if they ever say that in the episode. I'm just going to click on his face to make sure I'm looking at the right guy. Yeah, special counsel. Okay, I guess that's what we're calling him, since that's what IMDb says. We introduced him in the season 1 finale, and here we see him with his own henchman, his operative, is how he says it, but his name's Hirsch. And he's kind of like a bigger, bulkier version of Reese. He's like a bulky, because he's got a very similar suit that he wears. And he's kind of intimidating, and he's going in to investigate. And when he sees like a blurry photo of Reese and that he intervened and whatever, he's like, oh, I'm going to kill him. I'll find out who he is and kill him. So I do think it's interesting that we're leveling up the villains of the season from HR to the people in the government that are actually trying to hide the machine. It feels like a natural step in terms of like how to go up the ladder and make it feel like a bigger threat and more related to the core, because the HR had nothing to do with the machine. The fact that this threat does have some loose connection to it, if not a big connection, is a natural kind of like, okay, we're up in the ante, it feels bigger, feels more grand and more exciting as a result. So I dig that. But there's a third character in their scenes, Denton, who, when they're talking, it seems like when they're talking about Alicia being killed, one of us is already gone. It seemed like he's referring to people who know about the machine in the government. That's what it seems like he's referring to. And this Denton, it looks like he's trying to run away, but the reveal at the end of the episode is that he's actually going to a trap set up by Root. Root stole a phone from a woman during the episode, and she mentioned that she was having an affair with a married man, and it turns out to be this Denton. So Root's whole plan this episode was ultimately to get to Denton, and we'll see what she wants with him next episode. But I suspect that he is one of the few in the government who at least know about the machine, if not directly get the information from it. So we'll see what Root's going to do with him. But that was a fun little connection at the end that I didn't see coming and really appreciated. I thought that was a fun reveal. So, as for the rest of the episode, and there's still like a lot of fun stuff here. The new dynamic with Carter and Fusco is really enjoyable. Fusco's like giving her a face when he realizes that she calls him John, like you're on a first name basis. That was a fun little bit. I appreciated the humor later on in the episode when Fusco's meant to go get the person of interest after he's already done a runner. He ends up getting nabbed by the gang of neo-Nazis that are out to get this guy. This I think he's like an accountant. I think his job was, but they get him and Fusco, and they're tied up and they've got ball gags in their mouth at this neo-Nazi place. And there's some threats and whatnot, and eventually Reese shows up and he comes in. And the demeanor from Reese, that he just doesn't want to be dealing with this shit. He's like, I just want to get this over with. And it leads to what I think is a new team member. I did not see us adding a dog to the main cast, but I think we've got a dog now, because he takes a dog from these assholes who takes commands in Dutch. And he takes advantage of that. But it doesn't show you the fight. Like, it builds up to the fight, and it's actually really funny. Because you see obviously one of them come through the window, but Reese just walks out of this building like he's just annoyed he had to deal with it. Like, he just doesn't give a shit. And Fusco's annoyed. But the stuff that was really funny here to me was the looks on Fusco's face with the ball gag in his mouth when certain things were said. Oh, I can't remember what the first one was. There was one that made me really laugh where it cut to Fusco's face with the ball gag and he looked concerned. The second one, though, which was quite funny, is Reese saying, I just want to find my friend, and I only have one friend. And it cut to Fusco going, with the ball gag in his mouth, and he's like, okay, maybe two. That gave me a chuckle. All the reactions from Fusco when he had the ball gag was funny, and then after they get out, him saying, I don't want to talk about it, we're just going to walk in silence. And of course, Reese has to crack a joke. Also, the running, forgive the word, gag in this episode, that Reese keeps showing up in Carter's apartment uninvited, of which she's rightfully a bit miffed at, but ultimately is helping him with the cases. Because he's a lot more open with Carter than he is Fusco. He's like, he admits that Finch is gone and he thinks he's got a lead. And then ultimately, the result of asking the machine for help and negotiating by threatening to stop going after the cases, by stopping doing the job, the machine does call again, and it's like it's a great moment because there's this pause and you're waiting for the phone to ring, and it does. And I think notably as well, great little touch here is that Reese says thank you at the end of this call. When he gets the information on the phone, he says thank you, and it feels very genuine, and again makes me think of like, no, he's treating the machine like a person rather than just a database to some extent, and that's super exciting to me. This leads to sort of what we're going to be doing next episode, presumably. He goes to Carter and says, we're going to Texas because it seems like he got information that led to a newspaper article about what I assume is 14-year-old Root and who she was as a teenager and when she ran away from home. So it looks like we're going to go into Root's past next episode with Reese and Carter. And that sounds fun. That sounds good. It's interesting them going on a field trip. I'm so used to the show being in New York and the present day stuff that it's kind of interesting to deviate from that. And I think despite the fact that there was this case of the week sort of forced in that Reese didn't want to deal with, it does kind of feel like this show at this point is more serialized in the sense that I feel like this episode would do absolutely nothing for you if you didn't watch season 1. There's so many moving parts and things that are important from season 1 that play into all of the threads, the flashbacks, the case of the week, the Finch and Root stuff, all of it is working so intricately that I don't think any of it would have any weight to it if you just came in and watched this as a standalone episode. It just wouldn't. A lot of season 1 episodes would work on their own. I don't think this one does, and that's not a complaint. I actually prefer it because of that. I think this doesn't make compromises to be a network TV show, this episode. If anything, it almost kind of mocks the idea that it's supposed to be that and actively has the characters reject the notion. Now, that's not to say that I don't think there'll be other standalone episodes once Finch is back where he's supposed to be. I suspect there's probably going to be, and they'll probably be very good, and I'll have lots of nice things to say about them. But this feels like we can have episodes like this now, probably at key points in the season, that are going to feel really exciting. And, there was a lot of fun stuff in this, like, Reese beating the shit out of Nazis is never not going to be fun, right? I'm always going to enjoy that. As is Carter hitting one of them with a grenade. I mean, it's a smoke grenade, but it's a grenade. All the same, to save Reese's ass, which, Fusco gets a little dig in about him losing the fight, and he's sort of like, I wasn't losing, I was just resting. But yeah, this comically large guy that's the leader of the gang, like, he is comically large. He gets like one of the other guys to get off their motorbike at one point, and he sits on it, and it just looks too. It looks kind of adult on a toy bike, like a little kid's toy bike. But he's it's not. It's an adult's bike. He's just huge. So yeah, all of the all that stuff was fun. The action was enjoyable, as it always is. This episode packed in so much. It's unreal how dense it felt as I was watching it, and it was so rich in its ongoing ideas and themes about friendship and humanity and about caring of one another and why that's important, and it can't just be the big picture, as well as all the juicy backstory for the machine, which was again kind of sweet, because now the machine is starting to feel more like a life form that I think we, the audience, are starting to care about in a way that's different, because it does feel like it's looking out for the characters in some way, and maybe it getting a bit more freedom is actually going to be beneficial to everyone. It's maybe going to allow it to be something else. And the exploration of that, especially if Root succeeds in any form of giving it a bit more power, could be very exciting. Now, of course, it could also pivot to being the start of Skynet, which, may be something that Finch is worried about. And I don't necessarily blame him for being worried about that, because, that's that timeline is very scary. But I think a big part of this show, and kind of getting back to what I was saying about it being taught the right things from the right people, it's kind of like Superman being raised by the Kents. The reason why Superman turns out to be this like great person, the goody two shoes that people who dismiss Superman as being, is because he was raised by two good people, not because he has the superpowers. And I think this idea that Finch, and maybe to an extent Reese and the present day parts of the show, are going to give it lessons. It's going to learn kindness, it's going to learn empathy, it's going to learn all these things, if it hasn't already, which it may. It's been watching people now for a decade, give or take, seemingly. So maybe it has already got a lot of more complex feelings that we don't realize yet. Fascinating stuff, and I'm super excited. One of the things as well is I was looking throughout the season on IMDb. I wasn't reading the titles, I wasn't looking at the photos, I wasn't reading the descriptions, I wasn't looking for any kind of spoilers. All I was doing, because I noticed this episode was like a 9.0 on IMDb, but it didn't have the top rated tag. I think I explained this in another review recently. I don't know if it was Person of Interest or another show, but IMDb is doing this thing now with the TV shows where if you look at the episodes, the ones that have the highest average ratings, and I don't know how many it is, if it's like a certain percentage of the show, maybe like, I don't know, like the top 3% of episodes will have this top rated like yellow banner next to the title. This was a 9.0 and it didn't have that. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, that implies there's a lot of higher rated episodes. And I scrolled just looking at the ratings, and I was seeing 9.3s and 9.4s in this season that still didn't have that banner. And I think it wasn't until the finale, which has got a 9.5, that it said top rated, which suggests to me that the average rating across the board for the rest of this show is going to be absurdly high if that's what it takes to get that top rated banner. Other TV shows will get that if it even sniffs a 9. So that makes it very exciting to go forward throughout the season. It feels like season 1 was a really great time, but it was the building blocks of the real meat that we're kind of getting to now. And this episode already felt like it was, not that it's necessarily better than every single season 1 episode, I'm not saying that, but it kind of feels like in general the standard might be lifting a little bit, and that we're running now. We were walking before, but we're running now. That's exactly what you want getting into a second season of a TV show. You want to feel like now they're really getting to the stuff that they want to be talking about. It all has more weight because we spent the time with the characters building to get to that point, but now we're really starting to feel like we're paying things off. And we're still early, ultimately. In the grand scheme of the show, we're early, but we're at the second big act, and that is super, super exciting. So, let me know what you think of the season 2 premiere in the comments, and of course you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Get some bonuses. There's bonuses for a lot of the movie podcasts that we do over in MailFuzz Movies. I do a bonus Columbo review once a month that you won't find on the regular YouTube, but that is me. So thank you once again. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?